Everyone, welcome to the explanations. In last video we covered the topic log-based protocol, and in today's video I'm going to cover a very important topic in DBMS for the theory question, which is deadlock in DBMS. Okay, so first of all let us understand what is a deadlock in DBMS. So in DBMS, deadlock occurs when two or more transactions are waiting. Here we can say that deadlock occurs. The main reason is when two or more transactions are waiting indefinitely for resources locked by each other. So I'll explain you this. Locked by each other. See what it is saying? It says that if there are two transactions or two processes and they are waiting for the resources which has been locked by the other process. Okay, so let us stand this with a diagram. Suppose this is a transaction 1, or we can say a process 1, or a transaction 1 we can say, and it has acquired this resource. Sorry, if this is the arrow, it means that this P1 is waiting for this R1. Okay, and here we have another process, that is P2, and suppose there is a resource R2. This P2 is waiting for R2, but see the changes here. This R2 has been acquired by P1. It means that this P1 is using this R2, but the same R2 has been, P2 has been waiting for the same R2, and this has been acquired by P1. Now, in order to complete the task of P1, it wants this resource R1. It is waiting for the resource R1 in order to complete its task, but this R1 has been acquired by P2. Okay, so this R1 is with P2 and P2 is waiting for R2, but this R2 is with P1 and it is waiting for R1. So this is known as a deadlock, in which two processes are waiting for the resources which has been locked by the other process, and this cycle is never going to be end. So you can see here in a deadlock, the first property is if you are going to draw a graph between the process, transaction and the resources, you are going to get a cycle. So if your graph is a cycle, it means that it is going to be in a deadlock state. Okay, so this is the definition of deadlock. Now in deadlock we are going to study a number of steps are there. For example, the first step is deadlock prevention. Okay, so this is a very important topic inside the deadlock. The first part is deadlock prevention, we can say. So deadlock prevention is we are going to prevent the deadlock, the strategies that is going to prevent the deadlock. Okay, so first strategy for deadlock prevention is wait die method. Okay, so wait die method, it is a very important method. It is very important method for deadlock prevention. So sometimes they ask you this in MCQ questions, right? Like which one of the method is a deadlock prevention method? So wait die method. Okay, so this method, it is based on non-preemption. Non-preemption means suppose there is a transaction T1 and it is using a resource R1. So before the completion of tasks, it is not going to leave this R1. It is not going to preempt. Okay, so it means that a transaction should either wait for this resource, or the transaction should abort the process, we can say. Okay, so here what happens in this wait and die scheme? First of all, we do the timestamp assignment. Okay, so what happens in timestamp assignment? Each transaction is assigned a unique timestamp when it starts. Okay, whenever a transaction starts, we are going to assign a time to that, and this time is going to this timestamp is going to check the age of transaction. Age of transaction means whether the transaction is new transaction or the older transaction. Okay, so for this purpose, in order to check the age of transaction, we are going to assign a timestamp. Okay, and second thing that we are going to use in this wait and die method is thing that we are going to use is conflict resolution. Okay, conflict resolution. So what is a conflict resolution? Conflict means to resolve the conflict between any two transactions which is going to take the resources. So here how it happens is when a transaction T1 requests a resource held by another transaction T2. So what happened? The resource is with T2 and T1 is requesting. So what happens? So there are two cases here. If T1 is older than T2. So how you came to know older? By using the timestamp. So if T1 is older than T2, okay, it means that T1 is allowed to wait, and if T1 is younger than T2, it means that T1 is aborted. Okay, T1 is aborted, and here T1 is allowed to wait, and here T1 is aborted. It means that T1 is allowed to wait means what? It means that T2 is going to get the resource, and here T1 is aborted means what? It is going to be restarted again later, and T2 is going to get the resource. Okay, so this is the conflict resolution. Here let me explain in another way also. Okay, it means that here the older transaction wait for younger ones, and here it prevent the younger transaction from waiting for older transaction. Okay, so this is the wait die scheme, and the second scheme under this is that is deadlock prevention is und wait scheme. Here in this approach, it is a primitive approach. It means that a process can come out from its transaction, and here the older transaction primed, we can say primed, PREMPT, which also means abort. It primed or abort the younger transaction instead of waiting for them, but the younger transaction can wait for older one. Now the second, this two was the method for deadlock prevention. Second thing is deadlock detection. So how to detect whether a deadlock is going to happen? So as I already discussed in the definition part, for this we are going to use wait for graph analysis. Okay, so it is a very suitable method for deadlock detection. So in this method what happens in this method? In this method, a graph is constructed based on transaction and their lock. So while constructing a graph, if the graph contain loop, it means it indicates what? It indicates a deadlock. So how to draw this graph, I'll be discussing in the question part. Okay, so after this I'll go to a question part and there we'll discuss. For example, if there is transaction T1 and there is a transaction T2, if the graph becomes like this, it means that it is a cyclic graph. So it means that deadlock is going to happen. So this is how the deadlock is detected here. Okay, for deadlock detection algorithm, we can use a number of algorithms. So generally we can use this weight and die graph analysis also, and a number of algorithms for this detection part. Next one is deadlock recovery, third one. Okay, so third task that we can do is deadlock recovery. Okay, so what is deadlock recovery? Once a deadlock is detected, it must be recovered also. Okay, so what are the steps for deadlock recovery? First one is rollback. Okay, what is rollback? Rollback means whenever a transaction is aborted, it goes back to a safe previous state. This is known as rollback. And second thing for deadlock recovery is resource preemption. Resource preemption. What is resource preemption? It means that temporarily revoke means to take back, we can say revoke or take back some resources from transaction and assign them to other transaction. Okay, so next one is fourth part of this is deadlock avoidance. Okay, so it means that the avoidance means that whether to allow a transaction to proceed or not. So what are the methods for this? For this, the first method is wait for graph. Okay, as we discussed, if while drawing this wait for graph, if we get a cycle, we should avoid the transaction. We should not allow this transaction to proceed. And the second method is by using the Banker's algorithm. So this Banker's algorithm, it basically deals with the resource allocation algorithm also, we can say. Okay, it deals with whether allocating a resource will lead to a deadlock or not. If it leads to deadlock, we are not going to assign the resources. If not, we are going to assign the resources. Okay, so this was the part for deadlock in DBMS. So in next video I'll come up with some other topic. Till then, stay safe and thank you.